Welcome back, my wayward sons and daughters. So what brings you to the Ghost Host lair tonight? Wait, let me guess. More stories, right? Well, you won't be disappointed. Tonight, I have some truly horrifying tales to tell, especially the last one. So let's jump right into it. Our first story is from an OP that had a pretty horrifying experience as a kid. It's called Locked in My Granny's Cupboard and Heard a Weird Voice.
When I was around 7 or 8 years old, I'm 39 now, I was in my granny's house watching TV. It was only me, my gran, and my older cousin that was in the house. It was a Sunday around 3 p.m. I remember this because every Sunday the football results would be announced on TV, and my older cousin would always lay on the floor with a notebook and write them down. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But anyway, I used to hate when the results were being read out, so decided to leave my gran's house and head back home. So I said bye to my gran, never said anything to my cousin as he was busy laying on the floor writing his results down, and walked into the next room, the kitchen, where my gran had a walk-in cupboard where the jackets were kept. I opened the cupboard, seen my green jacket hanging up. Stepped inside the cupboard to pull the jacket off the hook, and the door slammed shut behind me, locking me in pitch black darkness. I fumbled around and grabbed the round door handle, turned and pushed, but nothing. It seemed like someone was on the other side of the door, holding it shut. Now for the unbelievable part. I start to hear a low, deep noise, kind of sounding like those guys that do the throat singing thing. I don't know what it's called. Then like a male voice whispering softly in a sort of Arabic language. I'm now screaming, crying, punching and kicking the door, and it's still not opening. The voice in low sound is still chanting away in the background. I'm panicking like crazy by now, and my heart is beating out of my chest. I then lean on the door with my shoulder and push my feet on the back wall, then bang! The door flies open. I stumbled forward and fall on the kitchen floor, and no one has been there holding the door. In my head, I'm convinced it's my older cousin playing a prank. So I run back into the living room, and my cousin is still laying on the floor in the exact same spot, writing his football results down. And my gran is still sitting in her chair, and they both look like they've not heard a thing. My gran seen I was distressed and asked me what's wrong. I said nothing, put my jacket on, and walked home and never told anyone what happened. For years, this has played in my mind. The whole event must have only lasted for 30 seconds or so, but inside there it felt like a lifetime. I'm not a superstitious kind of person, but this 100% happened to me. I can't explain how I got locked in, as there was never a lock on that cupboard door. It was only ever a round turn handle. But most of all, I can't explain that noise and voice I heard. I don't know. With being a kid, it was just my imagination playing up on me or something. But to this day, I can't explain what happened. What do you guys think? Any help would be appreciated.
Wow, that sounds pretty terrifying. I probably would have brought it up to your grandmother though, just to see if she had any experiences herself. Next, we have one from a young lady that is being haunted by a man she never knew. This one is simply called Grandfather.
My grandfather passed away before my birth. I never knew him or knew much of him, as my aunt, mother, and grandmother hardly spoke about him. I get the sense from them that he was not a very kind man in life. The kindest thing I ever knew of him was that he liked to pat my grandmother on the behind. A love tap, and he did it often. That was his love language, apparently. Almost 15 years after he died and another marriage later, my grandmother was in a skiing accident and injured her foot. After failing to care for it, she developed gangrene and had to have her right leg removed below her knee. On the day of her surgery, she told me that even though her leg was dead, she wanted to walk for one last time, so that was what she did. Upon arrival to the hospital, she said she exited the passenger seat, walked through the parking lot into the hospital, and to the gurney in which she climbed up on. She told me that during the entirety of these movements, she felt my grandfather patting her on the behind. She told me she had no doubt that it was him. Fast forward over 20 years. I entered a very new and high-stress profession. After coming home one night in tears and debating my future in this job, I fell asleep on the couch face first, and then I felt him, clear as day, my grandfather patting me on my behind. I hadn't thought of him in years and had no connection with him other than being blood. But, as my grandmother said, the second it happened, I knew without a doubt that it was him.
Well, that story was real creepy in more ways than one. Our next one comes from someone that had a chance encounter with the former resident of her friend's house. But she claims that, "This is my house."
When I was about 11 years old, my friend and her family moved away to this large property down south. They moved really quickly. It was a nice piece of land too, with its own creek. It was in a hilly area with misty mornings. On holidays, I went down to stay with them, where I would wake up early and feed the chickens, ducks, and geese. One morning, I could see an old lady just standing in the mist, staring at the house. Originally, I ignored her, thinking she was someone's grandma going for a morning walk, but she just stood there. I asked her if she was okay. She said, "You can see me?" I thought she was just weird, and it was confirmed when she said, "This is my house." I said it was my friend's house. She kept saying, "This is my house," and I told her it wasn't. Then she turned around sulking about people being in her house, and suddenly vanished. I thought she walked off into the mist. Later, I told my friend and her mother that some old lady was staring at their house. The mother called the neighboring properties to ask if someone's grandma was lost or left the house in case they were senile. The neighboring houses said there wasn't any older women around. The last time I ever woke up early to feed the chickens, ducks, and geese was when I was getting the feed ready, and I felt like I was being watched. This old lady appeared from nowhere and screamed into my face, "This is my house!" It scared me so much, I closed my eyes and pushed my hands out in defense, then started crying. Because everyone else was still asleep, I crawled back into bed. I told the family what happened, and they told me that they bought the property as an estate sale because the elderly owner, an old woman, passed away in her sleep. The last and probably somewhat comforting encounter before I left, I dreamt I was out in the early morning again, and the old lady was there. She wasn't screaming into my face and scaring me. She said she was sorry. Because I actually do believe in ghosts, I think when someone passes away suddenly, they linger, because it's still a shock to them. And she was lingering because 1 minute she's at home, chilling out while watching TV. Next minute, her family is shelling out her home and selling her long-term property. I don't think it was evil, but more the human emotions and attachments were still there. I hope she moved on.
Well, I hate to tell you, but I think it will always be her house. Well, the hour is getting late. I know. You want one more story. We'll find them. I mean, it's not like I'm the one that needs my beauty sleep. Our last story is truly bone-chilling. It's called My First Paranormal Encounter.
It was a cold, dark day in November. I was 11 years old and spending the night at my step-cousin's house. I absolutely loved hanging out with her. We always had so much fun together. This was supposed to be just another normal day. My step-cousin, let's call her Katie, was 12 at the time and home alone when I arrived with my backpack. I was excited as we talked and planned fun activities for the next day. A bit of backstory about Katie: her father had passed away a few years earlier due to alcohol poisoning in her bedroom. That same bedroom we were supposed to sleep in that night. At the time, I didn't know that he had died in her room. All I'd heard was that it happened somewhere in the house. Her mother was extremely private and never shared details about his passing. She almost never talked about him. Katie was devastated for years, and honestly, who wouldn't be? Something like that changes a person. I never knew what her father looked like because my uncle had just married her mom that year. By that point, I'd known Katie for about 3 years. Anyway, back to that night. I had just arrived at her house, and after a while, Katie mentioned she needed to take a quick shower. I didn't think much of it and told her I'd wait for her in her bedroom. She headed to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned the water on. I was sitting on her bed when, out of nowhere, I heard a knock. It came from her closet, a loud, deliberate knock. I froze for a second, unsure if I'd imagined it, but then it happened again, louder this time. My heart started racing as I stood up and slowly walked closer to the closet. The closer I got, the louder the knocking became. And then, standing face to face with the closet door, I felt it. This overwhelming sense of darkness, like the air itself, had turned heavy and suffocating. It was terrifying, and I couldn't move. The knocking suddenly stopped, but before I could catch my breath, I heard the TV in the living room turning on and off by itself. The house was pitch black except for the light in the hallway. I don't know why, but that made everything feel even more unsettling. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in, and I ran out of her bedroom, through the kitchen, and into the hallway. When I stopped running, I realized the TV was off again, and the living room was completely silent. I could still hear Katie showering in the bathroom, completely oblivious to what was happening. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring into the pitch-black living room. Suddenly, the TV turned on again, its flickering light cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw it. The reflection of her father's face appeared on her baby picture hanging on the wall across from the TV. He looked confused, almost like he didn't understand how he was there. Then he saw me. Our eyes locked. His eyes were pitch black, completely void of life or emotion. I felt an icy chill shoot through me as we stared at each other. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the TV turned off, and he was gone. I was left standing in the hallway, shaking uncontrollably. My eyes were fixed on her baby picture, which now looked completely normal again. But then, in the corner of the room, I saw him. A man in a black leather jacket, standing next to the TV. His back was turned to me. He didn't move, he was just standing there quietly. I let out a quiet gasp, and he heard it. Slowly, he began to turn around. I started backing away, and he started walking toward me. His eyes were pitch black, and he had this twisted, evil grin on his face. His footsteps echoed through the house, heavy and deliberate, like he was a real person. I couldn't look away. He kept smiling, kept staring at me with those black eyes, and I just kept backing up until I reached the bathroom door. I turned around and pounded on the door with all my strength, too terrified to say a word. Katie opened it, shocked at the sight of me. I was shaking so badly I could barely speak, but eventually, I managed to choke out, "Your dad is outside." What shocked me even more was her reaction. She wasn't surprised. Terrified, yes, but not surprised. She told me her mom saw him sometimes, too. We stayed locked in the bathroom until her mother got home. When we told her what had happened, she believed me without hesitation. She even admitted that she'd seen him a few nights earlier, smoking a cigarette on the balcony. She pulled out an old photo album and flipped to a picture of him. I immediately froze. It was him. The man I'd seen. The leather jacket, the short brown hair, the same evil soulless grin. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I could feel the evil radiating from him when he came at me. He didn't want me there. I wasn't welcome in his home. I will never forget that night, and even now, many years later, talking about it still makes my skin crawl.
Gee, I bet. But you know what? It kind of makes you wonder if he's like that now. What kind of D-bag was he when he was alive? Well, was I right? or was I right? I bet you that last story will make you look in your closet tonight. But do you know what might help you push the images of terror out of your head? Just hit like, subscribe, and share this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, or have any thoughts about our stories tonight, or if you have any suggestions on subjects for upcoming videos, or even just general thoughts about my channel, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.